Lieutenant Marcus Reed stood in the negotiation chamber, exhausted from 3 days of intense diplomatic talks, watching a situation spiral out of his control. As thanks for your honorable service in bringing peace to our people, faction leader Torvak declared with formal ceremony, I present you with a gift, Sira, daughter of my house, to serve you as you see fit. A young Velrani woman was brought forward, barely out of her teens by Marcus's estimation, her long ears pressed flat against her skull in obvious terror, her hands bound with ceremonial silk that somehow made the situation worse. No, Marcus said immediately. I appreciate the gesture, but I cannot accept. We don't accept people as gifts. That's not appropriate in our culture. Torvak's expression hardened. You refuse my gift. You dishonor my house and the treaty we have just negotiated. Marcus's commanding officer, Colonel Hayes, caught his eye with a look that said careful. They'd spent weeks building this peace treaty. The wrong word now could destroy everything. I don't intend dishonor, Marcus said carefully. But among humans, people are not property to be given as gifts. Perhaps we can find another way to express gratitude. The gift has been offered before witnesses. To refuse now is to declare our agreement void. Torvak's hand moved to his weapon. Around the chamber, tension spiked visibly. Colonel Hayes stepped forward. Lieutenant Reed is honored by your generosity. He accepts your gift with the understanding that diplomatic protocols may require certain adjustments to traditional customs. Marcus wanted to argue, wanted to refuse outright, but he saw the calculation in Hayes's eyes. 3 days of negotiations, a fragile peace, and they were this close to preventing a conflict that could cost thousands of lives. Lieutenant, Hayes said quietly, accept the gift. We'll work out the logistics later. Marcus felt sick, but he also understood the impossible position. I accept, with gratitude. Sira was brought to him, shaking visibly. The ceremonial bindings were removed, and she stood there with her eyes downcast, clearly terrified. Marcus tried to catch her eyes to communicate somehow that she was safe. Sira, She flinched at his voice. The formal ceremony concluded, and Marcus found himself escorting a terrified alien woman to his quarters, while his mind raced through every possible way to fix this situation. Once they were alone in his small military housing, 2 rooms and basic amenities, Marcus tried to explain. Sira, listen. This situation is wrong. I didn't want this. I'm going to work with my superiors to get you home or wherever you want to be. You're not my property. You're a person, and this is. Please, Sira whispered, her voice shaking. Please make it quick. Marcus froze. Make what quick? The consumption, the stories say, her voice broke. The stories say humans toy with their victims first. Please don't, just finish it quickly. Consumption. Sira, what? Understanding dawned with horrifying clarity. You think I'm going to eat you? She nodded, tears streaming down her face. Sira, no, that's not. Humans don't eat other sentient species. We don't hurt people for entertainment. I'm not going to harm you at all. This whole situation is a diplomatic nightmare, and I'm trying to figure out how to get you home safely. She didn't believe him. He could see it in her eyes. She thought he was lying, extending her terror for his amusement. Marcus ran a hand through his hair, frustrated and horrified in equal measure. Okay, let me show you. The bedroom is yours. It locks from the inside. He demonstrated the lock mechanism. You can lock me out. I'll sleep on the couch in the common room. You have complete privacy. Sira stared at the lock like it was a trap. The kitchen is here. All this food, Marcus opened the cabinets, the refrigeration unit. All of it is available to you. Eat whatever you want, whenever you want. I'm not restricting anything. He was trying to help, but every gesture made Sira more terrified. When he showed her the bedroom, she thought he was isolating her. When he showed her food, she was convinced he was fattening her up for slaughter, a literal interpretation of myths she'd been taught since childhood. I know you don't believe me right now, Marcus said finally. But I promise you are safe here. I'm going to work on getting you home. Until then, this is your space. Take the bedroom. Lock the door if it makes you feel safer. I won't bother you unless you ask me to." He left her there and retreated to the common room, collapsing onto the couch with his head in his hands. His personal log entry that night was succinct. "They gave me a person as a gift. She thinks I'm going to eat her. How the hell do I fix this?" Day 3 of what Marcus privately called the worst diplomatic incident of my career. And Sierra still wouldn't eat in front of him. He'd wake up, find evidence that she'd taken food during the night, empty containers, used utensils carefully cleaned and put away. But the moment he was present, she wouldn't touch anything. "Sierra," he tried one morning, "you need to eat." "I'm not going to. I would never hurt you for eating. That's not how this works." She pressed herself against the far wall, as far from him as the small quarters allowed. Marcus sighed and left for his duty shift, making sure she knew the schedule so she could eat while he was gone. It felt like a failure, accommodating her fear instead of addressing it, but he didn't know what else to do. Colonel Hayes called him in for a progress report. "How's the situation with your gift?" "Sir, with respect, she's a person, not a gift. And she's terrified of me because of cultural myths about humans that apparently paint us as monsters." "I'm aware. Diplomatic Corps is working on repatriation, but it's complicated. Torvak's faction sees returning Sierra as rejecting their honor. We're trying to find a solution that doesn't restart the conflict." "How long?" "Weeks, maybe longer." Hayes's expression was sympathetic. "I know this isn't what you signed up for, but you're handling it as well as anyone could." Marcus didn't feel like he was handling anything well. He tried different approaches. Left written notes explaining that she was safe, that he wouldn't harm her, that he was working on getting her home. Sierra read them but didn't respond. He brought Captain Lisa Chen, the base's senior medical officer, to meet Sierra, hoping that another woman's presence might make her less fearful. Sierra was polite to Chen, but still wouldn't make eye contact or engage in real conversation. He started spending more time at the base gym and less time in the quarters, giving Sierra maximum space and solitude. But even this backfired. Sierra seemed to interpret his absence as him planning something worse, building her terror through anticipation. "I can't win," Marcus told Chen over coffee in the commissary. "Everything I do makes her more scared. She thinks giving her privacy means I'm isolating prey. She thinks providing food means I'm fattening her up. She thinks my attempts to reassure her are psychological torture." "What do the myths say about humans, specifically?" "From what I've gathered from cultural databases, because Sierra won't talk to me enough to explain directly. Her faction preserves extremely old first contact stories from when relations between humans and Velrani were hostile. Those stories got exaggerated over generations into literal nightmare fuel. Humans as monsters who consume other species, who torture for amusement, who are fundamentally cruel. And she believes this completely. She's been taught it since childhood by people she trusted. Now she's been given to a human, confirming her worst fears. Nothing I say is going to override a lifetime of cultural conditioning. So show her, not tell her. Let her observe human behavior across multiple contexts. Break down the myths through accumulated evidence." Marcus latched onto this idea. He started inviting colleagues to his quarters for game nights, casual social gatherings where Sierra could observe humans interacting normally if she chose to. She stayed in her room with the door locked, but Marcus thought maybe she was listening, watching through the crack under the door, gathering data that contradicted her myths. He made a point of being more visible in his daily routine, eating meals at the small kitchen table, watching entertainment programs on the wall screen, doing normal domestic activities. Nothing threatening, nothing that matched the myths. Just boring human normalcy. Day 7, he came home to find Sierra in the common room instead of locked in the bedroom. "Progress." "Hi," he said carefully, not moving closer. "How are you? Why haven't you hurt me yet?" The question came out blunt, confused. "Because I'm not going to hurt you at all. I know you don't believe that, but it's true. The myths say. I know what the myths say. The myths are wrong. I can't prove that with words, but maybe I can prove it with time. Just observe. Watch how I actually behave versus what you were told to expect. Eventually, the evidence will speak for itself. Sierra studied him with obvious suspicion but didn't retreat to the bedroom. Small progress. That night Marcus made dinner, basic protein and vegetables, nothing exotic, and ate at the kitchen table as usual. Sierra watched from the doorway, tense and ready to flee. Marcus didn't acknowledge her watching. Just ate normally, cleaned his dishes, and settled on the couch with a book. After an hour, Sierra crept to the kitchen and took food back to her room. The next morning, she ate breakfast in the common room while he was getting ready for his shift. They didn't speak, but being in the same space felt like progress. Day 10 brought the first real conversation. "Why do you apologize so much?" Sierra asked. Marcus was making coffee and hadn't realized she was in the common room. "What? You apologize constantly. For walking into the kitchen when I'm there. For your footsteps being loud. For existing, apparently. The myths say humans enjoy causing fear. You seem miserable about it." "Because I am miserable about it. You're terrified and I can't fix it, and this whole situation is wrong. Of course I apologize." "Monsters don't apologize." "Then maybe I'm not a monster." Sierra considered this for a long moment, then returned to her room without responding. But Marcus caught something in her expression. Not trust, not yet, but maybe the beginning of doubt about what she'd been taught. Progress. Day 14 brought crisis. Marcus returned from his shift to find Sierra collapsed in the bedroom, clearly in severe pain, her breathing labored. Medical training overrode everything else. He didn't ask permission, didn't explain, just acted. "Sierra, I need to examine you. Where does it hurt?" She tried to pull away, but she was too weak. Marcus did a quick assessment: elevated temperature, severe abdominal pain, signs of allergic reaction or poisoning. Something she'd eaten, probably. "I'm calling for medical transport. You need a hospital." "No, please," Sierra's voice was barely audible. "Don't. You're seriously ill. I'm not letting you die because you're afraid of human doctors." Marcus called for emergency medical transport while applying what first aid he could. The transport arrived within minutes. Marcus rode with her, holding her hand despite her obvious fear, talking constantly to keep her conscious. "You're going to be fine. The doctors here are good. Captain Chen is excellent. They're going to figure out what's wrong and fix it. I'm not leaving you. You're safe." At the hospital, Chen took over with practiced efficiency. "Allergic reaction to something in your food supplies. Severe but treatable. She'll be fine." Marcus stayed through the treatment. Through the night, falling asleep in the chair beside Sierra's hospital bed. When he woke, she was watching him with an expression he couldn't read. "You stayed," she said quietly. "Of course I stayed. You were sick and scared. The myths say humans would enjoy watching suffering. You looked upset." "Because you were in pain. Why would I enjoy that?" Sierra didn't have an answer. Over the following days, as she recovered, Sierra started observing Marcus with new attention, not through the lens of fear but with genuine curiosity. She noticed things she'd missed before. He was awkward around her, constantly uncomfortable, clearly not enjoying the situation. He apologized obsessively for startling her when he walked into a room, for his footsteps being too loud, for breathing too heavily when he was stressed. The apologies weren't manipulation. They were genuine discomfort with making her afraid. He made terrible jokes, genuinely awful attempts at humor that seemed designed to cut tension. Why did the Velrani cross the space station? To get to the other side. Yes, I know that joke is terrible. I'm terrible at jokes, it's a problem. He gave her space obsessively, sometimes to the point of obvious self-inconvenience, taking the longest route to the kitchen to avoid walking near her, sleeping on a couch that was clearly too short for his frame, maintaining distance, even when it made simple tasks complicated. None of this matched the myths. Monsters didn't make bad jokes. Predators didn't inconvenience themselves to give prey space. Cruel beings didn't show genuine concern for their victims' well-being. When they returned to quarters after her hospital discharge, Sierra sat at the kitchen table instead of retreating to the bedroom. Marcus moved carefully around her, maintaining distance. "Can I ask you something?" Sierra said. "Of course." "Why did you accept me? If humans don't accept people as gifts, if this whole situation makes you uncomfortable, why not refuse?" Marcus sat down across from her, carefully not too close. "Because refusing would have destroyed the peace treaty, would have potentially restarted the conflict. My commanding officer calculated that temporary discomfort for both of us was worth it if it prevented people dying." "So you didn't want me." "I didn't want anyone given to me like property, but it's not about you personally, it's about the entire concept being wrong." He paused. "You're not a gift. You're a person who got caught in a diplomatic mess. I'm trying to fix it." "How?" "My superiors are working on diplomatic channels to either return you to your family or give you actual choices about where you want to live. It's taking time because politics is complicated and nobody wants to restart the conflict, but it's happening. You're trying to send me away. I'm trying to give you choices. If you want to go home, we'll make that happen. If you want to be relocated somewhere else, we'll arrange it. If you want to stay on the human base, there are Velrani civilians who work here, a whole community that's an option too." Marcus met her eyes. "The point is, it's your choice. Not mine, not your family's, not anyone else's. Your life, your decision." Sierra absorbed this. Everything he'd done suddenly made sense through this new lens. The excessive space-giving, the constant apologies, the awkward attempts to make her comfortable. He wasn't playing with prey. He was trying to respect someone's autonomy in an impossible situation. "I need to tell you something," Sierra said, "about what I was taught, why I was so afraid." "Okay." "In my faction, we preserve stories from first contact between our peoples. Stories about humans being monsters, consuming other species, enjoying torture, fundamentally cruel. I was taught these stories from childhood. Everyone in my faction believes them. I gathered that you thought I was going to eat you, which is," Marcus made a face, "that's disturbing on multiple levels. Humans don't consume other sentient species. That's firmly in the nightmare territory category for us. So the stories are lies. The stories are probably exaggerated propaganda from centuries ago, when first contact was hostile, turned into nightmare tales over generations." Marcus pulled up information on his datapad. "Look, here's actual history of human Velrani first contact. There was conflict, yes. Both sides did terrible things during the war. But consumption of other species, torture for entertainment, that's fiction designed to make the enemy seem inhuman." Sierra read through the historical data, her expression shifting from disbelief to confusion to something like anger. "My entire life I was taught lies. You were taught what your faction believed. Whether they knew it was propaganda or genuinely believed it themselves, I don't know. They gave me to you believing you'd hurt me. What does that say about my family?" Marcus didn't have a good answer for that. Over the following weeks, Sierra's understanding of humans transformed from nightmare to nuanced reality. Marcus introduced her to other humans on the base, soldiers, civilians, medical staff, all interacting with Velrani colleagues normally. She observed humans being kind, frustrated, professional, funny, tired, fully human in ways that contradicted every myth she'd been taught. Captain Chen became a particular friend, answering Sierra's questions about human culture and biology with patient detail. "We're just people. We have good and bad like any species. The myths you learned focused on the worst of us and exaggerated even that into literal monster stories. It's not fair to you or to us." Sierra also met the Velrani civilian community on the base, people from different factions who'd chosen to work with humans, who'd built lives in interspecies collaboration. They confirmed what Marcus had said. The myths were propaganda, exaggerated stories from hostile first contact. "My faction preserves the worst stories," one Velrani teacher explained. Others preserved different narratives. What you learned isn't universal Velrani understanding. It's specific to your faction's isolated perspective. The diplomatic situation progressed slowly. Torvak's faction eventually agreed to allow Sira to make her own choice about her future, framing it as the gift choosing to honor the recipient by staying, which was face-saving nonsense but politically necessary. When Marcus explained her options, return home, relocate to a different Velrani community, or stay on the base, Sira took days to decide. "What do you think I should do?" she asked Marcus one evening. "I think you should do what makes you happiest and safest. But if you want my opinion, your family treated you like property, like something they could give away to honor a human they expected would hurt you. That's not love or care. He struggled for words. That's not how people should treat family. So you think I shouldn't go home? I think you should carefully consider whether home is actually a place that values you as a person, rather than political property." Sira eventually chose to stay on the base, taking a position in cultural liaison, helping bridge understanding between humans and Velrani, specifically working to combat the kind of myths that had shaped her early life. "I want to make sure no one else grows up believing the lies I did," she told Marcus. "Want to help build actual understanding instead of fear-based propaganda. That's valuable work. I'm glad you found something meaningful." Their relationship settled into something like friendship, coworkers who'd been through bizarre circumstances together and came out the other side with mutual respect. Sira still teased Marcus about his terrible jokes. "That pun was physically painful, Marcus. You should be ashamed." Marcus still apologized for things that weren't his fault. "Sorry my coffee maker is so loud in the morning." "Marcus, stop apologizing for existing." 6 months after Sira had been gifted to Marcus, she participated in a cultural exchange presentation about myths versus reality in interspecies relations. She spoke honestly about her initial terror, about the myths she'd believed, about slowly learning the truth through observation and evidence. "I thought I was being given to a monster," she said to the assembled crowd of humans and Velrani. "Instead, I met someone who was horrified by the situation, who worked constantly to make me comfortable, who prioritized my safety and autonomy, even when it would have been easier to just accept the power he'd been given over me. Lieutenant Reed showed me that the myths were wrong, not through words, but through consistent, patient action that contradicted everything I'd been taught." After the presentation, Marcus approached her. "That was good, hard but important. Thank you for letting me tell the truth about what happened, including how uncomfortable you were with the entire situation. The truth is important. People need to understand both the myths and why they're wrong, and they need to know that the gift situation was messed up from the start. Do you regret accepting me, knowing what you know now about how bad it was?" Marcus considered this carefully. "I regret that you were put through that terror, regret that you spent weeks thinking I was going to hurt you. But I don't regret the end result. You're doing important work now, you're safe, and you made genuine choices about your future. If I'd refused, you might have been given to someone who actually would have treated you as property. So I regret the circumstances, but not the outcome." That's a very diplomatic answer. "I've been working on my diplomatic skills, had a good teacher." Marcus smiled. "Plus, if I'd refused, I wouldn't have gotten to know you. Would have missed out on someone who now mocks my terrible jokes on a regular basis. Your jokes deserve mockery. They're crimes against humor. See, this is what I'm talking about, quality mockery. Can't get that just anywhere." Sira laughed, genuine, comfortable, nothing like the terrified woman who'd been brought to Marcus's quarters believing she was being delivered to a monster. The gift that was supposed to honor a human soldier had instead become something else entirely. A friendship built on mutual respect that survived impossible circumstances. A bond formed not through ownership or obligation, but through one person's patient insistence on treating another with dignity, until fear transformed into trust. It wasn't the relationship anyone had intended when Sierra was given to Marcus. It was better, because it was built on choice, respect, and the slow dismantling of myths through consistent, kind action. Sometimes the most powerful changes came from simple refusal to be the monster others expected. Marcus had never intended to be anyone's hero. He just refused to be the nightmare from Sierra's childhood stories. And that refusal, maintained with patience and awkward kindness through weeks of terror and misunderstanding, had changed everything.